Inbreeding is a problem. Inbreeding is more of a problem if you can't avoid it, but a lot of organisms have ways to avoid it, be it self-incompatibility, assortative mating, various types of assessment, or even full-on sexual selection. In this lecture, we're going to cover the different ways by which organisms choose their mate and relate assortative mating to speciation, give some examples of assessment, and relate these to fitness and genetics. All right, let's get going. One of the first ways is to prevent inbreeding. Now, there are a couple ways that inbreeding can be prevented. This is not really one of them. So, to prevent inbreeding, an organism is going to want to be able to know what are genetic relatives and then not mate specifically with them. However, not all organisms have that choice, and some have evolved novel ways of dealing with inbreeding depression, one of which is the elimination of bad alleles. This is kind of an interesting story. Elimination. Fig wasps. The mother fig wasp will lay all of her eggs in a single fig. And what will happen then is some of the eggs will hatch into males, some will hatch into females, and they will mate. Now, obviously, they're all siblings. So if we look back on the F gradient, or F ratio, we're going to see that the F is actually very high. Because not only did their mother lay all of them, and thus giving them an F of 1/4, but their grandmother did the same thing, thus giving an F of 1/8 if it was just their mother, F of 1/4 since it was their grandmother, F of 1/2 concerning their great-grandmother, and this has been happening for many generations, so F would be very high. So what happens to all those bad alleles? Well, the males and females are haploid. Thus, any organism that has a bad or a deleterious or lethal mutation is going to be eliminated at the offspring stage. So they will not get to mate, and the males won't get to mate with the females, and the females, thus, there you go. They're just not going to, they're not going to have those bad alleles because those bad alleles get eliminated because they're never masked by a dominant allele. So that's one way of actually dealing with this homozygosity problem. Another way of avoiding inbreeding is being self-incompatible. Now take an apple tree, for example. Apple trees don't breed true. So what that means is if you take an apple and you were to plant its seeds, you're not going to get all red delicious plants from a red delicious apple. What we do instead, if we want an orchard of red delicious apples, is we are going to cut branches from them and we're going to make a whole orchard of basically the same tree. Now, this tree doesn't want to breed with itself. It's self-incompatible. What happens is pollen is going to land on the stigma and will not germinate, or the pollen tube will not form, thus preventing it from reproducing with itself. Well, how then do we get the offspring? Well, we mate it with just another type of apple, like a crab apple, and have those available in the orchard as well to outcross. So by doing this kind of outcrossing, they're going to ensure a greater genetic diversity. Other plants are actually going to just move their flowers and the parts of their flowers around to have like thrumbs and pins, where an organism that comes in contact with the top of one flower is going to come in contact with the stamens of one and the styles of the other. An organism that comes in contact with the bottom will come in contact with the styles of one and the stamens of the other, thus ensuring an outcrossing event. Other organisms actually have dioecy, where you have one of them is male and one of them is female. I'm talking plants here. Holly trees, for example. So there are male holly trees and female holly trees. If you go around campus, you're going to find some of these holly bushes do not produce berries, and those are male holly bushes. These are different ways of self-incompatibility to ensure outcrossing. Of course, there can also be assortative mating, which is going to actually increase inbreeding quite often. Now, I'm not sure how well the audio is bringing it up, but what happens upstairs right now is the kids are having lunch, which means there's a lot of bouncing around, a lot of scooting of chairs, and a lot of yelling and screaming and giggling because lunch is a social affair. This is what happens when me, a high energy individual, chose as a wife a relatively high energy individual. We have very high energy kids. This is one of those cases of like mating with like, which is a little disruptive to my work from home. Like mating with like, though, can cause inbreeding. So what happens effectively is if an organism is looking for others that are similar to it, the ones that are most similar to it are going to be necessarily the genetic relatives. So that can be one cause of inbreeding. Another problem with like mating with like is something called regression to the mean. So let's see, so first off, like with like. Another example here is, of course, larger organisms mating with other large organisms, smaller organisms mating with other small organisms within a population. Now that may be genetic or that may simply be environmental, but that can cause a divergence between two subpopulations. One problem with like is something called regression to the mean. So if you were to have all tall individuals, this is one of those good examples, all tall individuals mating with all tall individuals, there are some alleles in there for short individuals. Now normally those alleles will not be expressed because they will be masked by the alleles for tall. However, as that population begins to kind of inbreed a little bit more, some of those short alleles are going to come out as homozygotes because the individual was heterozygous for one tall allele. One tall gene, and that heterozygosity will break down so it have an extra tall and an extra short, and perhaps that could even lead to lethality. So that is one possibility of what we see, where there's a bit of regression towards the mean. Another fun example of this was a breeding experiment done, I can't remember, I think it was in the 1900s, of intelligent individuals breeding with other intelligent individuals and getting kids that were of perfectly average intelligence due to this regression to the mean. Now it's more complex than that, of course. Another thing that's very complex is something called heterosis. Now that's where I want to cover this very briefly. We're going to come back to this later on. So let's say you have two very unlike individuals and they mate, and they're going to create a subpopulation of something that is kind of in between the two extremes. This is done a lot with plants where you have very tall corn and very short corn. You mate them, you're going to get medium-sized corn. Now, allowed to self, you're actually going to get a segregation of the genes. And allowed to breed with others that are, siblings, you're going to get a segregation of alleles. So you're going to have some homozygotes for the extra tall and some homozygotes for the extra short. And that's going to cause what's called heterosis, or if you mate unlike individuals, the F1 is going to be a mean, somewhere around the mean, and the F2 is going to be a wide array that is centered around the mean. We're coming back to that. That's not something you need to memorize now. It's something that'll be useful later. Something you would like to know now for assortative mating is how it leads to speciation. So monkeyflowers in specific are a good example of assortative mating leading to speciation. So here we have two species. This A and L are Mimulus lewisii and Mimulus cardinalis. This is some research done by the University of Washington. Douglas Shemsky and Ingrid Parker. Shemsky and Ingrid Parker worked in that lab, but not with, this paper was actually Shemsky and someone else. But anyway, A is Mimulus lewisii. It is a plant that is pollinated by bees. L is Mimulus cardinalis, and that is a plant that is pollinated by hummingbirds. Now what you see in between is what happens when you hybridize these two forcefully by just taking the pollen and the stigma, kiss, and making them mate like that. In nature, however, they have recently speciated due to one real allele. We found this one allele, I think it was YUP1 or something like that, which causes bees to be much more likely to pollinate it. So one allele is going to make more bee pollinated, the other allele is going to make it more cardinal pollinated, and variation in that one allele causes assortative mating with others that have the same allele, such that you actually end up with two different populations of organisms diverging in real time to being pollinated by bees and being pollinated by cardinals due to a one allele and then others being added onto that. We will be coming back to monkeyflower speciation when we talk about QTLs much later on. Then you have mate choice. Mate choice is when the female or the male gets to decide which one they're going to mate with. And this is really the opposite of random mating. If there is a certain allele that increases the probability that something is going to reproduce, it is definitely not under random mating. Now, female fitness is going to rely on the genetics of the mate, as is male fitness. We're going to come back later on to why females would be more choosy or why males may be more choosy. We're going to do a little of that. If you want much more of that, take ecology, especially field ecology. And this is going to be related to the fitness of the offspring. A female that mates with an inferior male, like Dr. Zoidberg here, is going to have lower fitness because her offspring are not going to survive as much and are not going to reproduce. So how is assessment done? Well, don't memorize this for this class. But I want to relate this class to ecology. We have different ways of assessing a mate, and I'm going to relate this specifically to speciation and evolution. Courtship rituals. If an organism is of the same species, then the courtship rituals should be the same, and thus assessment of the courtship rituals is a way of ensuring that you are mating with the correct species. Remember that mating with the wrong species is going to lead to a lower fitness of offspring because, well, we'll get to that in next week. Nuptial gifts. So a nuptial gift shows that the male is able to present a good feast to the female because the male is a good predator or a good provider, and thus will have good alleles for good predation or good provision. Parental care. Being able to assess a mate that is going to have good parental care ensures the female her offspring are going to receive good parental care. Not much in genetics or evolution right there. Territory. A male that has good genes is going to be able to maintain and defend a large territory. Thus, a female that assesses a male for good territory is effectively assessing a male that has a good set of alleles that they are going to then pass on to their offspring. Appearance. Let's face it. Sexy males produce sexy sons, which are going to be more likely to attract females. So the appearance of the male is going to be an indicator of the appearance of the offspring and thus of the reproductive success of the offspring. The appearance of the male also indicates the relative strength and stamina of the male in the face of environmental factors, thus being a direct indicator of what alleles are present and whether or not they are adapted to the environment. And last, imprinting, which is going to be a female chooses the males that are most similar to the males that she was raised with. Now this can lead to inbreeding in some cases, but it more often leads to just making sure that the species maintains fidelity and does not mate with other species. So you see how all of these different assessments, well, in one way or another, in some depth or another, are going to lead to a female receiving the best suite of alleles from the male. And sexual selection is all about that. While we're covering sexual selection, I want you to look back on the different ways of assessment and realize how well these all kind of match in here. Sexual selection is an extreme of non-random mating. Now it takes variability. The males have to look different, or the females have to look different, whichever one is being selected on, in order for there to be any selection. If they all look the same, then there is no selection. It's just whatever one is. It's not Mr. Right, it's Mr. Right here. There has to be heritability. If these traits are not inherited, then they are not going to be passed on to the next generation, so there's really no point in looking at it. And it also, of course, is different mating and reproduction. Whereas natural selection is different survival and reproduction, sexual selection is different mating and reproduction, where they may or may not obtain a certain number of mates, a higher number of mates. And a fun thing about sexual selection that we will be covering shortly is that sexual selection can lead to extreme phenotypes. Now we're going to get into runaway sexual selection in the coming lectures, but first we must actually discuss why sex is important in such terms as genetic linkage and linkage disequilibrium. So we're going to take a genetic break from this ecological and evolutionary smorgasbord of fun examples, and we're going to, in the next lecture, discuss genetic linkage.